Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you are returning, thank you as always for being here. You mean the world to me. I have some brand new projects for spring and Easter, so let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting. DIY number one. All right, I have a little terracotta pot from the Dollar Tree. It came, I think it was 2 to a pack. I've had it in my stash for a while. And then that little glass bowl, also from the Dollar Tree. I think that was maybe 3 or 4 to a pack. So this is a really inexpensive craft. I am using my pumpkin chalk paint because it seemed like the same shade as carrot, perhaps, maybe. I don't know. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you think this is going to look like a carrot in the end. But I gave my little pot a good coat of chalk paint, and then I did the same for the little glass bowl. Now the glass bowl ended up needing an extra coat, but instead of using my brush for the second coat, which personally I find ends up taking off the paint, I used my little makeup sponge, also from the Dollar Tree, and just dabbed the paint on it until it was fully covered. I just made sure that I had a generous amount of paint on the little sponge and dabbed it all over until it was nice and opaque. So once everything was dry, I have this little flower pick that I've kind of torn apart in the past. Sorry, you're not really seeing a whole lot of it. I'm just after the little grassy pieces that are still remaining on it. So I finally cut those off, and I'm going to cut them in half because they're longer than I need and not as thick as I need. So I figured I'd cut it in half and try to use both halves to get the look that I am aiming for. So I'm just kind of trimming off the ends to make them a little pointy, kind of like blades of, I don't know why I was thinking they needed to look like blades of grass, but I don't know. I guess the little, what would you call those? They're not fronds on the top of a carrot. Whatever the little greenery is on top of the carrot. I don't know. I don't know. This probably doesn't even look proper because I think carrots actually have more like leafy stuff going on the top, but I don't know. I was doing my best with this one, you guys, but I was just trying to get it to like bush out a little bit more rather than just sticking straight up. And then I trimmed off the bottom so it would all be the same at the base. Used a bit of hot glue there, actually a generous amount of hot glue. Set it down in there and waited until it was cool. And once that happened, I grabbed my jute cord and I'm going to wrap that around the base here. And I was trying to take advantage of the hot glue there. Some of it was still just warm enough for it to stick, but I did add a little bit more in there to kind of attach my jute cord. And my goal here is to cover up the glue. It does have a little bit of a glob there, so I want to make sure that the glue is all covered up, but then also just going to be adding a cute little bow to the carrot top, essentially. So once I had the jute cord situated there with the hot glue, I went ahead and wrapped it around several times until I got it the way that I wanted it. And now that I think about it, you know, carrots do tend to have that kind of little knobby thing at the top of them, right? At the base of their little greens. So this actually worked out quite well. And that only just occurred to me as I was talking about it. So happy accident, but went ahead and tied it into a little bow. And I'm going to add a little bit more hot glue here in a second, but I think I'm going to trim it off first. Yeah, so trimming the end, a little bit of hot glue just so that my bow doesn't accidentally get pulled open, but also to kind of situate it where I want it. And now this will sit right on top of my little pot. How cute is that? I'm grabbing a little bit of Spanish moss. I felt like I had too much there. I did end up putting more of it back in, but now I can put anything I want in this cute little carrot pot. But let me know what you think of this. DIY number 2. All right, this is a transfer from Choc Couture. And if you're not a fan of Choc Couture, or if you don't have Choc Couture, stay tuned because I've got another type of sign that doesn't need any of that. So for right now, I've got this piece of MDF. This was a scrap that we had out in our garage, and my husband Rich had helped me cut it down into a bunch of different pieces. So I've been using these for various signs over the last several months, but giving it a really good coat of Adirondack white chalk paint, getting all the edges. I did not do the back on this one. I was hoping that I was going to be able to keep it clean enough that I wouldn't have to worry about the back, because if you followed me for any length of time, you know I'd like all of my projects to seem finished. Not seem finished, but be finished. So I do end up covering up the back later, but more to come on that. I added a second coat of chalk paint. I went the opposite direction. I tend to find that I get better coverage this way, but this brush that I was using, it was leaving brush strokes also. And so this kind of created almost like a crosshatch kind of texture to it, which I kind of liked. I thought it was neat, but I wanted to make sure that my transfer was going to be able to stick to the surface. So I did sand it down just a tad. I distressed the edges a little bit and then just went over the surface, hoping that I was going to avoid bleeding with my transfer. Then I cut my transfer into its various pieces. I'm just following the guidelines on the transfer itself and trying to figure out exactly how I want to position everything on here. Yeah, so I just kind of went back and forth. I finally figured, you know what, I'm going to center my image, try and figure out how it needs to be, and then I'll deal with the flowers later. But right now, I don't know if you saw me running my finger over the little words. That's like the trademark information about the design. I don't know. The Choc Couture folks have warned us that that piece had also, with this new manufacturer that they used, had also become the screen material. So I'm just using a piece of Scotch tape to cover that up so that I don't accidentally get any of the paste in there and put color where I don't want it. So now I am making sure that I am fuzzing my transfer. I did this several times. In the past, I have not done it sufficiently, and my transfer has ended up sticking to my project, and then when peeling it off, it like left a greenish bluish residue. So definitely recommend that you do the fuzzing. Then I got it all lined up. I was using my ruler just to make sure that I had it pretty well centered, and now I am ready for the transfer. This is called Storm, this particular paste color, and I was trying to work quickly because I've learned in the past that when I don't work quickly, the paste ends up drying too much into the mesh, because the paste dries actually very quickly. And you know what? I thought I was moving fast enough, but then I started really worrying about it, and with good reason, because I didn't work quite quickly enough. Right here, I'm doing fine, right? Now, this is where I should have peeled it back to release the paste that's in that word. This is where I made my mistake, because I went to go and get another little squeegee so that I could do a little different color in that hash mark right there. So I'm doing this coral color between the word and the ish. So it's the little dash mark. And I do have this sped up 2.5 times. So while it might appear that from your perspective that I am working pretty quickly, I was actually working not this quickly, right? So it actually isn't bad. If you like the distressed look, this actually would be perfect, right? And if I'd been going for a distressed look, I would have been very happy with the outcome here. But it definitely was a little bit spotty for the look I was going for. So not to fear, I am going to touch it up a little bit later, and I'll show you how I do that. But in the meantime, I just continued to work with it, and I was a little bit more diligent about making sure that I was pulling up the transfer as I went, because I don't know about you guys, but I tend to be a rather slow crafter. I take my time. And I think about what I'm doing, and I regard the project, and I think about how I might want to change it or adjust it. I kind of dilly dally. this is it's just the way that I craft. I am not a fast crafter, and that's why I tend to speed up my video, and that's why I tend not to craft live, because I feel like I would bore you all to tears, because I'm just a slow crafter. That's just how it is. So at any rate, I continued to use the different colors and peeled them up. You saw I used the pesto, and now I'm using this coral color again on the other words, and I'll peel this one up, and just taking my time, but moving fast enough so that my paste isn't going to get caught up drying in the mesh, right? So you can see here, my words were much crisper. They are not spotty the way that my welcome-ish is. So I did a much better job moving forward here. All right, so that last little bit at the bottom, and I'm just using a baby wipe in between to clean off my little squeegee. That's all that is. I just figured, since I didn't have a lot of different squeegees, if I had multiple squeegees, I would have used multiple ones, because that would have helped me to just kind of keep going a little bit more quickly through the project itself. But it was working perfectly fine to use the baby wipes and cleaning it off in between colors. So now I've got my little tulips. I'm figuring out how I want them. I finally settled on kind of angling them here. I'm gonna go ahead and fuzz these as well. I'm just gonna make sure that they are nice and prepared to be able to be peeled off again. I'm gonna start with the coral color on the tulip heads, and then I'll use the pesto again on the greenery. And then that one little last bud, I will do last. So I'm kind of working my way down the transfer rather than bouncing around all over it. I don't know if it would work the other way. If I had put down all of the coral shade first, that might have worked just fine. But I wasn't sure with the need to press it back down again like that. I wasn't sure if I would end up kind of smearing the paste that was already deposited on the image. So I erred on the side of caution, and I just worked my way down the transfer. So, and if you ever need really good instruction or advice on the transfers, I highly recommend checking out my friend Teresa B DIY. She does a lot of the chalk couture. She actually is the one who got me involved with the chalk couture, and I don't do as much of it as she does, but I do it every once in a while, and I really enjoy their product. So there is that. So now I peeled that back. I'm being very careful not to peel the transfer up completely, because I want to make sure that I can add that little bud back onto the image. And then I did the same thing over on the other side, just making sure I got my pesto down, coming back in for that final little bud, and then I can peel up the transfer. And then I'll just go and wash the transfer off, and it'll be reusable. You can use these over and over again. I think they say in general you should be able to get 10 uses out of them. So if you like to make signs or other things with the transfers to sell, you can make multiples with only having to purchase the transfer once. So here I'm coming back in with a small paintbrush, and I'm just trying to fill in with the paste a little bit. Now, I was struggling a little bit because it was a bit on the thick side. So I eventually just got a smaller paintbrush, and I used the paste, but then I also was adding some water to it. And that helped tremendously. It helped the paste to move. And if you're not familiar with this paste, it actually is washable. So you can actually clean off the surface, like wash this all away and do something completely different if you choose to. So once I had that all done and everything was dry, I grabbed a new piece of parchment paper because I want to be careful not to mess up my image. And the reason I use can't talk, parchment paper is that usually paint won't stick to it, right? So that's great. So when you are using it for a project and you've got wet paint and you lift up your project, you're not going to pull paper up and have it stuck to your project. But on the flip side of that, if you set your project down on it and there is chalk paint on it, for example, the chalk paint will then stick to your other paint on your project and comes right up off of the parchment paper, if that makes sense. But anyway, you can see here I've got, this is kind of like a burlap-ish ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree. I had an issue with my nail gun there, or not my nail gun, my staple gun, but got that solved, made sure that that was nice and secure. And now I've got a piece of craft paper that I'm going to line the back of this with, just getting it all lined up, making sure that it is not going to hang over that top edge. I'm not concerned about the sides of the bottom because I'll be able to trim those, but my hot glue, it had shut off, and so it wasn't quite ready for me yet. So while that was heating up again, I opted to finish my hanger. I wanted to add a little bit of a bow to the top there. So just creating a loop, and I am going to make sure that it's looking the way that I want it. I'm going to trim that off. And then I'll take another piece to create tails, and I'll use that piece to not only create my bow, so tie it off in the middle, but also to attach it to the hanger piece. And because I'm doing it this way, where I'm just kind of tying it on to that, it will slide up and down on the hanger. So I'll have the ability to keep it at the top if I wish, or I could slide it down to one side if I'd prefer. But for my purposes, I really wanted it at the top. So I'm not too worried about whether it's centered right now because I can adjust it later. But going ahead and trimming off my edges, just cutting those at an angle. I did have some little frayed ends from the loop that were sticking out there, so I'm just kind of trimming those off so it's all nice and neat. And that is it for the hanger. So now I can flip this back over again and my hot glue should be ready to go. I've got my craft paper scrap piece here that I'll go ahead and get lined up again. And then I realized that the hanger was kind of pulling most likely from the top. So I wanted to not nail it, but staple it down again a little bit more and just banging it in to make sure it's nice and secure, and ended up moving my camera in the process because I was having it bounce on my craft table. But so I apologize, I'm a little off screen here, but I went ahead and added some hot glue across the top of it, secured the craft paper, and then I'll go ahead and just work my way around the rest of the perimeter of the sign. So just peeling the paper back. I think you kind of get the idea, making sure that I've got a bead of glue all the way around the edge, make sure that that is secure. And then I grabbed out my self-healing mat, and I am trimming this away with my X-Acto knife, just running it right along the edge of the sign. And so that's going to create my perfect little cut and have my project nice and finished. And that is it for this one, you guys. I think it is super cute, but take a look at the final reveal here and let me know what you think. DIY number 3. All right, so here is another option with a little welcome sign, or whatever type of sign you would like to make. It doesn't have to say welcome on it, but this is from the Dollar Tree. Cute little St. Patrick's Day sign, and I am using fern chalk paint for this one. I'm giving all of my little shamrocks a good coat. And then I coated the entire back with the same color green just so that my back is nice and finished. And I made sure I got all of the edges as well. The only thing I left was the banner on the front, and I'm using the Adirondack white chalk paint again on that. I gave it 2 coats of the white. And then I had the idea that I was going to use this little welcome sign in this pack. This pack is also from the Dollar Tree. It had a thankful sign and a harvest sign and a welcome sign. So I pulled out welcome and I set it down. Well, yeah, I set it down on here. I was like, it's a little too big. I thought maybe I could curve it. Yeah, these things don't bend that way. I ended up bending it a little bit, but not in a good way. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I can just set it down on there. And I didn't hate it. It's just, it's over, I was gonna say overlapping, but that's not the right word. It's running over the edges of the banner. And so I didn't love it. Could I live with it? Yeah, probably, but I opted not to. So I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing. In the meantime, I decided that the dark green was just too plain by itself. So I pulled out this other shade of green. It's actually called Irish. So it was perfect. And I'm using one of my makeup sponges to just dab on some of this lighter green color, just to give it a little bit more dimension, a little bit more interest, make it a little bit more fun. So I am not completely covering the dark green, as you can see. I don't intend to cover the dark green. I just wanted it to be dabbed on there, kind of like a faux finish, for lack of a better term. So yeah, just wanted to add a little bit something extra because it just seemed a little too boring to me. Now, if you prefer it just to be a solid color, please let it be a solid color. If you prefer to maybe just outline it in a different color, right? So I could have left the dark and just outlined all of the edges in the light green. Whatever makes your heart happy, right? Crafting is for you to be creative. This is all just meant for inspiration and to help give you some ideas. So I did get a little bit of green paint on my white banner, so I touched that up. And then I pulled out my green chalk paint pen. And I'm kind of air writing to get an idea of where I want my letters to be. Now, if you are not comfortable with just winging it the way that I am right now, you could certainly pencil it in first and then go over your pencil lines. If you have a vinyl cutter and you want to do something with your vinyl cutter, you could certainly do that, whether you create the actual word that you want to apply or if you want to make your own little stencil for it, you could certainly do that. If you have a stencil already and you prefer to use your stencil, again, so many options with this. You could even print something off of the computer and use the method where you cover it with graphite, like pencil lead, and then trace or run that over it, right? And trace that onto it. A lot of different options here. But right now I am just going back over my letters with like a faux calligraphy stroke. So I'm making all of my downstrokes a little bit wider, a little thicker. Just to give the letters the look like they are supposed to be calligraphy. And then once I did all of that and had that the way that I wanted it, I did end up grabbing out a different chalk paint color, and this is a darker green, and I figured I would just give it a little bit of an outline. So I'm just coming through and outlining my letters. Ooh, sorry, I was trying to silence my phone and now I'm making a racket. So banging my phone on the table here. But I just went over not over each of the letters, but I outlined each of the letters just to help try to make them pop a little bit more. You don't have to do that. It's what I opted to do. And these greens ended up ultimately being about the same shades as the greens I had used on the shamrocks. So that worked out well. And then I decided that it needed a little bit something more, so I added another little hand-drawn shamrock on either side. And to do that, I just made little heart shapes, 3 little heart shapes next to each other, one at the top, one on the right, one on the left. And I did that on the other side as well and just made a little stem. And once those were dry, I then grabbed my lighter chalk paint and just chalk paint marker, excuse me, and just made a few little highlights on it, just again to help try and make them a little bit more interesting, make them pop. And then all I had left to do was add the hanger back on. Now you could use some other sort of hanger if you choose. I opted to just use the little twine hanger that came with it originally, just tied it right back on the same way that it had been originally. And this little project is all done. But let me know what you think of this one. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the project. If you did, remember to give me a big thumbs up. Please leave me a comment. Let me know which one was your favorite. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.